And welcome to DBT and the Dharma, episode 5.
Yeah, today we're talking about the describe skill.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to need you to describe to me the describe skill. What is that?
I can do that for you. So the describe skill, it's a mindfulness skill in DBT. And the idea is that you are describing, so at the most basic level, it's like just describing like, I'm here with Maddie. The wall is blue, right? Just the facts, not, oh, I like Maddie. That's a preference, not, and it may be a fact that it's my preference. Does that make sense?
Okay, yes. Yes.
But it's a preference. In my opinion, Maddie's fabulous. And as much as a strongly held opinion it may be, it's not a fact.
Yes.
It's an opinion.
It's an opinion. Okay.
Maddie is here is a fact.
Okay.
Right? Maddie's wearing black. Maddie is doing this podcast with me.
So we're describing facts.
Exactly. So it is, so what's that for? So on a very basic level, using the describe skill can help you not dissociate.
Okay.
If you just kind of drop in and describe what's in the room, like if you're getting triggered by something. But we're going to really explore a more sophisticated understanding of the skill. And so how is it helpful to be able to discern facts from opinions? And here's why it's helpful.
Tell me.
There's a few reasons. The first one is, okay, legitimately, how many of you out there tend to use hyperbole?
Guilty.
Hyperbole is like when you tell a story and you, like, it comes from literature, right? Hyperbole is like you're telling a story, but you're going to make it a little bit better, a little bit exaggerated, right? So I think the reason that a lot of people, they stray from the facts and they start using hyperbole is particularly for emotionally sensitive people. Sometimes the way it feels, especially growing up, you might have found that when you tell people the facts, they're like, why are you having such a big reaction to those facts?
Oh.
Right? It's not that big a deal. So what people do when they're hyperbolizing is they're trying to match the story to how it felt.
Got it.
So I had a wonderful friend who we would go out, she worked with me, and we would have a really fun weekend, and we'd come back and like it felt so fun, but like if you told the story you probably wouldn't really, you'd be like,
you had to be there.
Yeah, exactly. And so she'd be telling the story and I'd be like, what? I was like, oh, that sounds like way more cinematic than what actually happened, right?
Yeah.
But I could understand, that was where I got an understanding of that. I was like, oh, she's describing what it felt like. She's telling the story in a way to evoke the feeling that we had, even though the facts might not evoke those feelings for someone else.
Okay.
So, in spite of that, what I have found is as we grow older and we're dealing with people who maybe, we kind of try and surround ourselves with people who have a little bit more of the sensitivity or like kind of more of an understanding, some sympatheticness. That kind of hyperbole can sound like bullshit. And one of the problems with, like, if I come to you and I'm like, oh my God, I had the best weekend. It was amazing. We had so much fun. Like, everything we did was just outrageous. You have no idea what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm literally just giving you my opinions about the weekend, right? Now I could be like, and we met this movie star and we did that thing, you know what I mean? And then you'd be like, wow, that really is outrageous.
Yeah.
You would have your own opinion. But what I find is like often when you actually do explain the facts and you give the other person a chance to have their own opinion, people tend to be better at validating.
Yeah.
Right? So if I tell you, I had a really great weekend. I went to dinner with a really wonderful friend, and I'm not really just telling you the facts then because I'm saying wonderful friend, but let me just really do the facts. So I went to dinner with a friend. I felt close to her.
Mm-hmm.
So the way that I feel like my emotions are a fact, I felt happy when I was with her.
So the emotions can be a fact for you.
Yeah, it's like so you know that like my interpretation of something may not be a fact, but my emotions about it. It's a fact that when I go to dinner with my friend, I felt happy.
Got it.
Right? And then we went to a show at the Ryman.
Cool.
And I knew the lyrics. Fact. Right?
Fact.
I knew the lyrics and I was able to sing along and I really enjoyed the show. Now you can make your own opinions about that. What's your opinion?
My opinion is that the Ryman is cool. That's a cool place. It makes me happy that you got to spend time with a friend. And I'm curious where you went to dinner.
Wait, where did we go to dinner? I'm thinking about when Holly was here.
Yeah.
We had a really good dinner. I don't remember where we went.
That's a fact.
But the food was, like, we enjoyed the food. Okay, let's cut this because it's getting too in the weeds. Yeah. Let's just cut back to where you said the Ryman is cool. I think the Ryman's cool.
I think the Ryman's cool.
Perfect. Right. So that's your opinion, and then that kind of gives you we have a connection then because you're like, oh yeah, that sounds cool.
Gotcha.
That sounds like a fun night because in your opinion, you would probably like having a night like that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah, that makes sense.
So when you're telling a tragedy, right? If I tell you something that was really painful for me, then if I just stick to the facts, in my experience, people actually tend to elicit more sympathy than if you just start telling them your opinions. My husband is a jerk. That's one of my favorite things is when someone says, well, I'm using I feel statements that you learn in therapy. I feel like you're a jerk is not actually, it's an opinion, right?
Yeah.
I feel hurt. That's a fact.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, okay. Communication is a reason to use the describe skill and stick to the facts so that the other person really understands what you're talking about and can form their own opinions about it. And hopefully your facts will be persuasive and they will share your opinion.
Okay.
Right? The second reason is it's easier to problem solve.
Ooh.
It's very hard to problem solve someone being a jerk. But it's possible to problem solve, they spend every Sunday watching football and yelling at the TV. Oh wait, but that brings me to yelling, right? So how many of you have ever been in a conflict with someone and you swear you were not yelling, but they're like, no, you're yelling. And then what happens is the whole conversation gets derailed because someone's opinion is that you're yelling, and now you're arguing about whether or not it's yelling, right?
Yes, I've had this experience in a lot of ways, but in one particular way, which kind of segues me into where I think this intersects with the Dharma. So in the beginning of 2020, I was a full-time musician. Then COVID started and I lost all my gigs. I was supposed to go on a European tour. It was going to be amazing.
Okay, wait. So let's slow down and let's do the describe skill.
Oh, okay. Right? Yeah, sure.
So what I heard, you were a full-time musician. So would the facts be that you were making all your income from?
The fact was I was making all my income from music. When COVID started, I lost a lot of income.
Okay. You were supposed to go on a tour.
I was supposed to go on a tour. The tour was canceled. And I ended up starting a new job.
Okay.
Because I needed money.
Okay. That sounds like facts.
Okay.
I think that sounds like facts.
Okay, cool. So those are the facts.
So but here's the great thing is I get to have an opinion about that. That sounds, to me, in my opinion, that sounds really disappointing.
It wasn't pleasant.
And really hard.
It wasn't pleasant. which like why I thought about it when you started talking about yelling is because I was working at a mortgage lender.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a mortgage loan officer and I would help people refinance their houses. But part of the job for the first couple months was cold calling.
Unpleasant.
And y'all will understand why we're saying it like that. But what I would do, I'd have to make 1,000 calls a day. No joke. That is not hyperbole.
That's not hyperbole.
That is not hyperbolic, no. So I'd have to make 1,000 calls a day. And imagine, out of how many of those thousands of calls would it be people yelling?
Mm-hmm.
It would be people yelling at me and being like, why would you? Just really intense emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And me as a sensitive person, I was like, no thank you. This is the worst job in the whole world. I hate this. Mm-hmm. And then I talked to my teacher about it, my Dharma teacher, and was explaining how much distress I was getting from this job and constantly being yelled at. And he walked me through what I'm about to talk about, which mm-hmm. was noting that the sound of someone yelling at me was unpleasant. Mm-hmm. And being able to get to a point where when someone would yell at me, it wouldn't just pull me into this big story. Instead, it would just say, it would give me some space and I could just say, oh, that's unpleasant. Mm-hmm. So it sounds a lot like this describe skill, because I'm describing the facts. Like, the sound of that is unpleasant.
It's in my experience.
In my experience,
right.
The sound of this is unpleasant to me.
I experience it as unpleasant.
So
you bring up an important point, because when we're talking about the describe skill, mm-hmm. it relates really closely to the non-judgmentally skill. Mm. And the non-judgmental skill, you get to discern whether something is helpful or harmful.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I think that that's in the same, even though like helpful and harmful are opinions, I think that you could make that distinction of recognizing when you were taking that non-judgmental stance, you're stepping back and you're observing and describing your experience.
Yes, exactly. And this is what it is. The whole, it's called the second foundation of mindfulness. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we talked in episode 1 about mindfulness of breath and body. That's the first foundation. Mm-hmm. This is the second foundation. Mm-hmm. So it's called mindfulness of feeling tone, which is really just mindfulness of noticing when something is arising. Is it pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? Mm-hmm. So oftentimes this is when in a sense way. So sight, sound, taste, smell, feeling, like mm-hmm. sensation of the body. Mm-hmm. But in Buddhism, we also have a sixth sense, mm-hmm. and that's thought. Right? So we see mm-hmm. thought just as the ears hear, all on their own, the mind will think. Mm-hmm. So what happens when we have a thought, or we smell a smell, mm-hmm. or we hear something, our mind will automatically label it mm-hmm. as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral before we even have a story around it. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, mm-hmm. I have found in my experience. And so when we can really intentionally notice that label mm-hmm. of, ooh, unpleasant. Mm-hmm. This happens to me when I'm meditating a lot. So I'll meditate in my house and my dog will bark. Mm-hmm. And I hear the dog bark. And my initial thought is to get up mm-hmm. and go and go and get him to stop barking mm-hmm. or let him out. Mm-hmm. But I'm trying to commit to my practice. So I notice, ooh, unpleasant. And I'm just going to notice that it's unpleasant. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to sit with the fact that it's unpleasant for a little mm-hmm. bit and see how that feels.
So you like, there's something about that mental noting mm-hmm. that you don't have to escape from it, mm-hmm. that it separates you from a little bit.
Yeah, which is what a lot of the Dharma is. It's noticing the feeling tone. It's having mindfulness so that we can respond in a wise way. Mm-hmm. And it's just different spots to have mindfulness towards.
So one of my favorite things about you, my preference, one of the things that I enjoy about hanging out with you is, so if you tell Maddie a story, you're like, oh, like, I went to the Ryman. What would you do? You would say,
pleasant.
Yes. I'm like, my hip hurts.
Unpleasant.
It's so sweet.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's so validating when you do that. You're like, oh yeah, that is pleasant, or that is unpleasant. But so there's this. So I think what I'm hearing you say is that the simple fact of noting the feeling tone can reduce your suffering.
Yeah, for sure.
Because if you're like, pleasant, like you're just noticing your internal reaction to a sensation, to an experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're also noting when it's unpleasant.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just, okay, unpleasant.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually kind of an interesting way of validating yourself also.
For sure. And there's also neutral.
And there's neutral. Right, so there are some things that don't elicit any particular response.
And those ones are harder to note, but notable. Yeah, the thing that happens when we note, I think everybody kind of understands when we note unpleasant, it can be like, ooh, I'm just going to be with this. I'm going to be with this unpleasant thing. But when we note pleasant, that's another whole can of worms, because when we note pleasant, so often, we talked about this in an episode about craving, about want, like, ooh, I need more. Give me more. I'm going to tell the story about this bird, because I'm a birder now. That's my thing.
Okay, start again. Do the thing about I'm 30 and the blah, blah, blah.
We can keep that. Like, we've got that already.
We've got that already.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we can keep that. So I went to New Orleans to help you out.
Yeah, I was exhibiting at a conference about
there
the
you
book.
were, and it went so well.
It was amazing.
Yes.
So, but you're there for work. You're also having fun.
I'm having fun because it was our second wedding anniversary. So my wife came with me, and one of the things I was super excited about now that I'm a birder was a specific bird that kind of hangs out around that area in New Orleans, and it's called an indigo bunting, which is the cutest name.
I know. I have thought pleasant
indigo bunting. This is beautiful blue bird. And so we set aside a whole morning to go bird watching. We were going to go to this beautiful spot, which we went, and I'm looking for all these birds, and I keep hearing the chirp of the indigo bunting.
Oh.
I keep hearing.
And this is like a special thing, right?
It's special for me.
But like, because of the migratory pattern.
Migratory patterns, yes. So essentially, they are only in certain spaces for a little amounts of times. Like any birding, it's like any bird I see here in May, I can't see in September or things like that. So I was in Louisiana, and I knew because of the migratory patterns that the bunting was going to be there. And I'm searching, and I don't see it. And there was a lot of disappointment because I was really excited because they were unpleasant. Yes. So I get home. A few weeks later, there was a new migration pattern where about 5,000 different birds found their way through Nashville. And I happened to go for a walk with my dog. And I knew this was happening, but I wasn't really expecting to see anything. And walking with my dog, I'm texting on my phone. And then I look up, and directly in the path in front of me is an indigo bunting. And I remember talking to my dog and being like, buddy, like literally out loud being like, don't move.
Don't scare the bird.
So I pull up my binoculars super slow, and I'm watching this bunting, and there's all this joy, and then the bird flies away. And so I thought it was such a cool way to illustrate what it's like to note something as pleasant without clinging to it. So noting, I'm seeing this bird that I've been excited to see, and it's such a pleasant experience, and just flies away. It's this non-attached appreciation to when pleasant things arise that can only come from noting things as pleasant. Not notice it wasn't like, I've been waiting to see this bird my whole life, and when it flies away, I didn't think about capturing the bird. I didn't think about trying to cling to it. I thought,
Did you take a picture?
No.
Okay.
I actually never take a picture of any of the birds I see.
That definitely sounds like non-attached appreciation.
Yeah, that's the whole point for me.
Because I feel like sometimes I get into that like dilemma sometimes. Like it's pleasant to me to film things. Like I enjoy that. I enjoy taking pictures. but I also am very aware that it's an attachment. It's like I'm trying to capture this moment and cling to it, and in doing that I sometimes miss the actual moment.
Yeah, which happens all the time.
I mean, you see that at concerts all the time. Right? Where
Yeah.
someone's so focused on videoing it that they're not experiencing it.
Yeah, so this whole practice has really changed my life. Like being able to note, oh, this is a really pleasant experience, and just appreciate it in the moment without needing to cling to it or figure out how to make more of it. Or noting when something is deeply unpleasant and being able to detach myself from the feeling that it's always going to be this way, from any narrative about why it's happening. It's more just like, oh, okay, yeah, this is unpleasant. And once I note it's unpleasant, I get this space to be able to have discernment
about if it's helpful or harmful. It's so interesting because I think, the describe skill, we're like kind of looking at the facts, right? But I always combine it with the non-judgmentally skill. And so I feel like it's interesting because pleasant, unpleasant are definitely opinions, right?
Yeah.
But I think the language of it, the feeling tone language, it's almost like it's another emotion. Doesn't it feel that way? Like,
sure.
Because there's a sensation of pleasant. Do you know what I mean? A sensation of unpleasant. But because it feels to me like being able to drop in and describe that, it is really the same function of the describe skill. It gives you a little bit of that separation.
Yeah.
Because, I sort of talked about with the describe skill, the first thing is communication. The second thing is problem solving. It's easier to problem solve when you're dealing with the facts. And emotion regulation, managing your emotions. Like when you're sort of distilling the facts instead of saying, like, it's never a fact that you're worthless. It may be a fact that you lost your job, but I'm thinking that in concert, like in connection with that, okay, I'm just going to distill the facts, but then you can also validate those facts by acknowledging the pleasant and the unpleasant. Like in terms of emotion regulation, I feel like that's sort of like the next step with the describe skill is like, okay, so here's the facts, and then you have the discernment. It's pleasant, it's unpleasant, it's helpful, it's harmful. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense, and I think you'll find as we give you some actionable tips for this, it happens a lot quicker than you'd expect. Your mind will log something as pleasant or unpleasant very quickly. Very, very quickly, and that's what causes us to react. That's what causes us to write the story. So really what we're doing is kind of exactly what you said. We're just kind of stopping it for a minute before the story starts to note, okay, this is pleasant or this is unpleasant.
So it's sort of almost like you're like, okay, so the first thing is like you're going along and you just start having a big feeling, and you can just notice pleasant, unpleasant, and then I feel like then you can combine that with like looking at the facts. Well, what is the facts about what's causing the pleasant?
Yes. Yeah.
What are the facts about what's causing the unpleasant?
Totally.
Right? But it's so important to discern the facts so that you don't get trapped in opinions. Like, and I feel like that language, like, we talked in the other episode about craving, and if you're like, well, I'm only good if I continue having this pleasant sensation, that's not actually a fact. It's a fact that you're experiencing a pleasant sensation and that you like it, that you have a preference for
Pleasant.
And that, I'm trying to think of a pleasant fact.
Beans.
The cat, it always comes back to my cat. Right, so being with my cat, when I'm with my cat, that's a fact. It's pleasant. That's my experience of it. It is an opinion.
The feeling tone.
The feeling tone. I feel like almost feeling tone is like the third thing. There's fact, opinion, there's your preference, and then there's the feeling tone.
I would say personally that I think the feeling tone comes before the preference, because most of the time we want to pull in the thing that is pleasant and push away the thing that is unpleasant.
Maybe that's even part of preference.
I think it might be.
Yeah.
So as we're talking about what are some actionable ways that we can do this, I wonder really, like, what do we want our listeners to do with this? I'm kind of in the thought of take a minute and start to note things around you as things are coming up. Is it pleasant? Is it unpleasant? Is it neutral? Or even just in this moment?
Like right now, literally right now.
now.
Think about everything that's happening around you right now.
Or within you.
Or within you. And just note, is it pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? Yep, I like that.
Yeah. And when something big happens, when something big arises, when there's a big emotion mind moment, before you start to write a story, can you note simply pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? And that's a great way to practice it. If you want to practice it on the cushion, you just use this as your anchor. This pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. Go back to the breath. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. Every time the mind wanders, you just say, is this pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? And it gives you a lot of space to be able to be a little bit more effective and to suffer less.
Yeah, so it's all of these tools to help you kind of step back and become the observer of your experience. So the feeling tone, observing your experience. Even with the describe skill, you're observing and labeling your experience. And then with mindfulness, you're always like you're stepping back and like being in the present, but you're observing your mind's tendency to do whatever. Yeah. So I think that's the action step. Be discerning the difference between opinion and fact, and discerning your feeling tone
Around that.
The pleasant or unpleasant or neutral.
Absolutely. Go practice.
Fabulous. Thanks, Maddie.
Yeah. Catch you on the flip side.